Concerns still in our hearts. Tina.
So maybe we'll do our song first, and then we'll take our quiet moment. It somehow feels like sometimes sort of backwards to me to do them, be quiet and then sing. So we'll be loud and then we'll be quiet. So I'm just going to reverse the breathing music and the song. This song was I found it on YouTube and it had so few views, and yet it's this perfect song for this topic, and I think it should be heard more. It's called "Do You See Me as an Equal?" The lyrics are great. Could you skip to the B section? That's the chorus. So I'll just teach that part, and I think you'll actually pick up A as we go along. A is just only very slightly more complicated because the lyrics change. So we'll do B all together to learn it, and then we'll pick up the rest as we go along. So the song is called "Do You See Me as an Equal?" So the B section goes, it's a little bit high for me, but I think it'll fit in most people's voice really well. They say don't judge the books just by their covers. You guys do that one. They say don't judge the books just by their covers. Next part is, how can we do less by sisters and brothers? How can we do less by sisters and brothers? For we are truly equal, one people just the same. You try. For we are truly equal, one people just the same. Last part. Let's love each other as we are living on this plane. Let's love each other as we are living on this plane. Let's try the whole B together. They say don't judge the books just by their covers. How can we do less by sisters and brothers? For we are truly equal, one people just the same. Let's love each other as we are living on this plane. And for kids, this is not the kind of plane, not that kind of plane, but like this plane of existence. Okay, so let's go back. We can go back to the beginning, and then you guys come in for all the B's. And if you pick up A, then by all means come in for A as well. Do you see me as an equal? In your eyes do I unfold? Do you see me for the person that I am? Do you see me as an equal, free of labels, names, and signs? I'm living well and whole here in my plan. They say don't judge the books just by their covers. How can we do less by sisters and brothers? For we are truly equal, one people just the same. Let's love each other as we are living on this plane. Did you know that human difference is the way we're meant to be? But only when we know that are we whole. For our differences make us stronger, each with our abilities, and together we comprise one family whole. They say don't judge the books just by their covers. How can we do less by sisters and brothers? For we are truly equal, one people just the same. Let's love each other as we are living on this plane. It's true here in me and there in you. Just behind we can see what we can do. Together we can truly be known for our abilities, living, loving, laughing, being free. See if you can do the A section this time. Now we share this tiny planet with me, home as one great family. Though different as the fishes in the sea. But when blinded by appearance, we disable those we see, and we handicap our own humanity. They say don't judge the books just by their covers. How can we do less by sisters and brothers? For we are truly equal, one people just the same. Let's love each other as we are living on this plane, and we'll all be whole once again. And we'll all be whole once again. So now I think is a good time to take our little moment of quiet for our joys and concerns and our song and all the other thoughts that are usually running around in our heads and can just be still for a moment. So I'll play just a bit and then I'll stop. Now are the kiddos staying for this part? Okay, so I will not play Go Now in Peace. Stay now in peace.
All right. We open today with these words from Kim Nielsen, author of A Disability History of the United States. Human variability is immense. We see and hear in varying degrees. Our limbs are of different lengths and strengths. Our minds process information differently. We communicate using different methods and speeds. We move from place to place via diverse methods, and our eye colors are not the same. Some of us can soothe children, some have spiritual insight, and some discern the emotions of others with astounding skill. Which bodily and mental variabilities are considered inconsequential, which are charming, and which are stigmatized changes over time. And that is the history of disability. So now I'll turn things over to Noelle McClooney for our reflection.
Hello, there it goes. All right, so we're going to talk about, so obviously we have the theme today of disabilities. This month is Developmental Disability Awareness Month, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I am a physical therapist. I've been working with the disability population, specifically the developmental disability population for the last 15 years, mostly with pediatrics, but also with adults. So I have a little bit of insight in this area. You can skip this slide. There you go. So the purpose of this campaign, this awareness month, is to educate the public about developmental disabilities and to highlight the many ways people with and without disabilities come together to form strong, diverse communities. And this campaign is by the council, I can't remember the whole name, the National Association of Councils of Developmental Disabilities. And they are 56 councils so each state and each territory have a council that support people with developmental disabilities. So they come together this month every year to run this campaign. We usually like to do a little UU connection as to kind of how does this relate to our faith. And if you're familiar with our principles, one of them, the first one is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So by learning about disabilities and people with disabilities, we are living more by that principle. Also, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. So it's really all about inclusion. So what is a developmental disability? A developmental disability is a condition that causes impairment in either physical, learning, language, or behavior areas. And it usually begins before birth. It can happen during birth, but it's usually thought of kind of before birth. It impacts day-to-day function, and it usually lasts throughout the lifetime. There's a lot of developmental disabilities. I just chose 3 for us to kind of talk about today. I basically edited a presentation that I developed for the nonprofit that I worked for. We work with people with developmental disabilities, and we wanted to make sure that all our staff knew at least the basics of the developmental disabilities of the people that they were working with. But I just chose 3 to talk about today, just to keep it brief. So intellectual disabilities is the most common developmental disability, and it's a significant limitation in intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior. Intellectual functioning could be considered mental capacity, such as learning, reasoning, problem solving. You need to get an IQ score between 70 and 75 or below to indicate intellectual disability. Adaptive behavior is another part of that. So they need to have that other piece, but then also adaptive behavior. So having difficulty with conceptual skills like language literacy, money, so learning about how to use money, social skills, interpersonal skills, social skills, practical skills like doing your laundry or hygiene. These are some of the skills that we work with the people in our nonprofit, especially the transition program and the adult program. We work a lot on these skills, these practical skills, so that they can be as independent as possible. There's a lot of causes to intellectual disability. One can be genetic conditions. So you saw in that book before, Down syndrome can be a cause of intellectual disability, also Fragile X and other genetic disorders. Autism spectrum disorder, though people with ASD don't necessarily have intellectual disability, but some do. Fetal alcohol syndrome, cerebral palsy, exposure to toxins, traumatic brain injury, such as shaken baby syndrome. And then cerebral palsy. So we just talked about intellectual disability. Another common one is cerebral palsy. And it's abnormal brain development or damage to the developing brain that affects a person's ability to control his or her muscles. So cerebral is meaning the brain, and palsy means weakness or problems with the muscle. So that's where that term cerebral palsy comes from. A lot of causes, it can be due to abnormal brain development, so malformation where part of the brain just doesn't develop at all or incorrectly, or it can be due to trauma like a brain hemorrhage or stroke in utero, lack of oxygen. This often happens if there's a traumatic birth, which is why doctors do C-sections a lot more, because if you try to let a natural birth go on and there's a cord wrapped around the neck or something like that, it can result in cerebral palsy. So I know a lot of people sometimes, I've talked to a lot of moms that, they're upset that and they had to have a C-section, but a lot of times it's to prevent conditions like this. There's different types of cerebral palsy, so it depends on where the damage to the brain occurs. So if it's to the cerebral cortex, you can get stiff muscles or spasticity. You've probably seen it where you've seen somebody who uses a wheelchair and you might see them kind of move like this, and that's that spasticity, and that's because the brain is affected and it's not creating the right signals down to the muscles. You can also have damage to the basal ganglia that can cause a different kind of movement. It looks very different from the other types of cerebral palsy. It's not as common. You can have damage to the cerebellum where you'll see ataxia of the movement. So the movement's like very stiff because it's affecting the coordination. In fact, when Desmond had his brain tumor, it was in the cerebellum and it looked very much like he had cerebral palsy of the cerebellum. So it was interesting to me, though also traumatic at the same time. And then you can have a mixed combination where if you have damage to different parts of the brain, then you're going to see mixed presentation of how the condition presents. A lot of impairments occur with cerebral palsy. Spasticity we kind of talked about, but you can also have motor weakness, which can impair mobility, speech, feeding. I've worked with a lot of kids that have swallowing problems, and you don't think about that, but there's a lot of muscles that control the swallow. And if you can't control the oral muscles, you can have trouble with the chewing in order to swallow. And then if you have the trouble with the swallow itself, that can cause issues. So feeding therapists work a lot with kids with cerebral palsy. Visual impairment, hearing impairment, emotional disturbance, epilepsy, cognitive impairment or intellectual disability, and learning disability. So they're all kind of common with cerebral palsy. And again, it depends on where the damage to the brain occurred and how severe it was. CP is actually more common than it used to be due to medicine actually getting better because preterm babies are able to survive at a much younger gestational age than they used to. So as early now as 23 weeks gestation, babies can survive if they have the right care, but that puts them at a lot higher risk for developing or having cerebral palsy. And then the last one I want to talk about is just autism spectrum disorder, very common right now. It is characterized by deficits in social communication and social interaction, and it's across multiple contexts, so that's very important. Somebody who has trouble with social, at the home or at the school, but is perfectly, capable in other contexts does not have ASD. It has to be persistent and consistent across different contexts. Deficits you'd see is social emotional reciprocity. So you can see in this picture, There's that lack of back and forth engagement with the person with ASD. Deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors. So eye contact is a very common one that people talk about. So you can see in these pictures, there's just that lack of typical eye contact that you see with typically developing kids. And then they have difficulty developing, maintaining, understanding relationships. And this can vary from just adjusting behavior to suit various social contexts. So definitely with people that have less support needs, or sometimes called higher functioning. So people who have less affected by ASD, they still function, with their typical peers, but they tend to not read social cues as well as the typical peers. So they may see things that are odd, that make it difficult for them to have as many relationships as their typical peers. They could also have difficulty, with imaginative play. So you'll see kids with ASD, if they're in a room with typically developing kids, they might be playing a pretend game with like the dollhouse or whatnot, and the child with ASD might be like repetitively playing with something like, I'll talk about like a Frisbee. I had this little girl and she would just spin a Frisbee repetitively, and that's what she always wanted to do for her play. Also just absence of interest in peers. So they can be completely uninterested in peers. That's not always, but just sometimes. So that's why they call it a spectrum disorder, because it's very different for each kid. Okay. And then restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, activities, as manifested by at least two of the following. So repetitive things, you might see motor movements, hand flapping is a common one. So this little video, hand flapping. There's lots of other repetitive motor movements. I had a little guy, he always had a card in his hand and he liked to flick the card. That was kind of his repetitive thing. There could be like a motor mouth movement. So it doesn't always have to be hand flapping. That's just a common one. And then things like echolalia, that's what this little cartoon is showing, where you'll say, oh, do you want to play? And they'll be like, oh, do you want to play? They just kind of repeat what you say. They don't really understand sometimes what the language is. Also, you tend to have kids that will script. So some kids like to watch certain shows over and over again, and then they almost communicate using parts of the video that they watch by repeating some of the phrases from the TV shows that they watch. So it's called scripting. They can tend to have an insistence on sameness or being inflexible. You have this little picture here of this little boy who's kind of lined up all his toys. So some really have kind of that obsessive compulsive disorder, like OCD characteristics, where they need to have things that are very lined up or of one color. I have French fries up here because I've had a lot of kids where they have very limited foods because they are very particular, like they'll eat only French fries, but they have to be from McDonald's. They can't be from like other places. They can kind of tell. They're just very particular about certain things. I have this picture here of a picture schedule. So I use these a lot. So kids with ASD tend to have trouble with transitions. So moving from playing with this toy to then going outside, or going to, transitioning from playing, oh, now it's time to go use the bathroom. Any kind of those transitions are very difficult for them. So if you have a schedule, that tends to help them know kind of what's next and helps them transition. Again, they have a highly restricted fixated interests. So again, I had that little girl who just always wanted to spin a Frisbee. That was what she liked to do. It tends to often be kind of atypical kind of play. So most typical kids aren't going to be spinning a Frisbee, but they often like that visual of the spinning. Thomas the Train tends to be a very common fixation for a lot of kids with ASD, or trains in general for some reason. A lot of kids with ASD like trains, and vacuums, at least in my experience. A lot of kids really like the vacuum, and so we use that as kind of a reinforcer at the end of the session if they've done well in the session, and then they can vacuum to clean up. So. And then they tend to have hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input. So things like the fire alarm. So we have to be very careful when we're going to do a fire drill that people kind of know that the fire drill is happening because it can really set kids off, the fire drill sound. Some kids are actually hyporeactive to sensory, so they actually don't feel as much. And that's what that picture of the hand there is. Some kids will bite their hand to the extent that they're even bleeding, and it doesn't bother them. They have that kind of reduced pain sensation. And then that visual sensory, they tend to really like visual things. Like we have these bubble tubes that they really like, or this mirror with colors and lights. So they tend to really like visual and sensory things. Symptoms usually present in early development. So again, it is a developmental disability. So technically it probably, it's already happening in utero. Signs can actually be seen before 1 year and be diagnosed by 2 years. But unfortunately, most children aren't diagnosed until 4 years or often after. There's a tendency, I think it's getting better. There's more awareness of autism, but it used to be a lot where doctors like, oh, they're just, we'll just wait and see. And, every kid develops, at their own time, which is true, but it's not always true, right? And they need to really, doctors really need to be following best practice and doing the right checklist so that they can catch ASD as early as they can so that those children can get the services that they need. And then severity level, just wanted to talk about that. So there's, according to the DSM-5, that's where I'm getting this specific diagnosis, words they talk about severity level 1, 2, and 3. I never really hear anybody using this in general population, but technically that's how it works. I try to use the terms requiring support, requiring substantial support, requiring very substantial support instead of higher functioning or low functioning. But it is used very commonly in the general population, that higher functioning, lower functioning. I'll use the higher functioning, but if they're lower functioning instead, I'll use requiring substantial support. So I think that's just a more respectful way to talk about it. And then ASD is difficult to track. So as far as prevalence, there's a lot of discrepancy as to how common it is, and that's because there's, like I said, every adult and kid with ASD presents differently, so it can be hard to really identify. There's no biological diagnostic markers yet. There's changing diagnostic criteria, and there's delayed diagnosis in those higher functioning people. It used to be just a few years ago, in 2018, they were estimating 1 in 44 8-year-old children have ASD. And now when I was updating this thing, 2023 report is 1 in 36 have ASD. So it's very common. I have a couple family members that have ASD. So it's very common. It occurs in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. And it's still definitely more common in boys, 4 times more common in boys than girls. And more common with people that have certain genetic conditions. It's more common if you have a sibling with ASD, for another sibling to have ASD. And then again, half of children with ASD have average to above average intelligence. So I just want to make that clear. So just because somebody has ASD doesn't mean they have intellectual disability. They can be actually above average, and especially certain people with ASD who have a very restricted interest, because again, that's part of that diagnosis. If, say, they're really into engineering or some specific thing, then they can get really good at that particular thing. And then I wanted to show just a couple little videos. So this video, I'm obviously somebody I work with this population, but I'm not in this population. So I wanted to share a video of people. These are advocates in the developmental disability population, and they're sharing kind of what their thoughts are on this awareness month. And then I have one other little video at the end that's like a minute long that just is one that I really like.
I think I'm gonna start cutting carbs. I need to drop my belly fat.
If you want to drop this.
Yeah, my name is Vernon Saltu.
My name is Carol Grabby.
My name James Matthew Lawson.
I am Billy Hardigan.
Natasha Cohen. Nice to meet you.
It means putting the spotlight on some of these amazing people that I have the privilege to work with and showing the world how amazing and how capable and able they really are.
It means, acceptance. It means equality to me. It means that I'm a person. It means that I matter.
It means to me that it's a time to raise awareness about people with developmental disability.
Showing the world that people with disability do exist, and they are in the community, they're in the workforce.
I recognize and make sure they have support.
And how they can achieve anything in their lives, no matter the disability.
I was born healthy, but 4 weeks later, I got meningitis, and I was sick for the first 3 years of my life. The aftermath caused me to have cerebral palsy. I use a power wheelchair since I was 3 years old. I use an iPad to speak.
And some days it can be downright exhausting because I have to learn how to navigate the neurotypical world.
I don't want to say that it's bad because it's something that is part of me that makes me great. But I can say that it's a struggle, it's a challenge.
Sometimes I need things broken down and explained to me in steps or easier ways.
Well, I'm an independent woman. I have been living on my own by myself since last year. It's challenging times, but I just take it day by day.
I love my job, and if it's perfect for me.
I have a condo in Taunton, Connecticut. I am also a health leader and global messenger for Special Olympics. I just got promoted to be a coach for Special Olympics. I wish they knew how capable we are. They could learn something by watching and talking to individuals who have a disability.
Just because we have a disability does not mean that we can't do things like own a home, we can't get married. I've been married for about 10, almost 11 years.
I wish other people knew that functioning labels belong in the garbage. I mean, imagine if somebody called you low functioning. How insulting is that? Labels belong on jars, not on people.
They were human beings, and they were not monsters, and we're not, just because some of us have different types of way to communicate, it just means that we have a different, unique way to communicate.
I wish people would take time to get to know us, see what we're all about.
And yes, we do have a disability, but that doesn't stop us from living our lives to the fullest extension, like getting a job, having a family of our own, having our own apartment.
We're people, and we have so many capabilities.
I have seen how people without disabilities treat people with disabilities, and sometimes it's not good. I think that they are uncertain, have pity, or get nervous to communicate with disabled people.
Don't say, oh, I'm going to teach, and then just do everything for me because I will never learn. Let me learn from my mistakes and I'll grow from it. But if I don't learn from my mistakes, I don't know how to do things on my own.
It's helpful when people are direct with me and tell me exactly what it is they need or how it is that they're feeling. And things that people do that are not helpful is talk to me as if I was a 3-year-old. They're not stupid. They're very smart people. You don't have to talk to them like they're 5. They're adults. Talk to them like adults.
Ask, do you need help? And if we say yes, you can help us. But if we say no, then the answer is no.
This marks the potential start of a third world war.
One last one.
Thank you, Noelle, for that reflection. So we're a little short on time, so I think we're gonna skip a few things, but we are gonna pass our offertory basket, and Ted, maybe you can play something during the offertory basket. Okay. So I'll read the closing words, which is relatively short. It's a poem by Michelle Kidwell. What we see isn't always what we get. There's a story not told, the inner strength not spoken, but lived quietly. We tend to look at things we can see at only a glimpse, forgetting to look deep within, to see the strength that it takes, to fight the battles that need to be fought. It takes a strength that goes without words. What we see isn't always what we get. Someone's whole story isn't written in glimpses. Okay, please join me in reading the words provided for extinguishing our chalice. As this flame is extinguished, we pledge ourselves to be bearers of the light wherever we are. Now is the time for announcements. Does anyone have any announcements?
Hi, everybody. I have two announcements. March 16th, we are having our congregational meeting, so we do ask that everyone come for that. That will also be voting on the next budget and wait, no, March 16th is the meeting. No? It's the retreat. I'm sorry. I have it in my phone wrong. It's a lot of dates to remember. Okay, March 16th is the congregational retreat. Thank you, Matt. And at that, we'll have a lot of things going on. And one of the things is we'll talk about the results from our congregational survey, which was sent out. A link was sent for Google Forms in an email. If you didn't get that email, or if you prefer paper, I have the survey here. If you would like to fill it out today, please come see me and I can get it to you, and then you can give it back to me and I can make sure it gets to the right hands. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Just a few quick announcements. We'll be having movie night on March 15th at 7 p.m. We'll be watching UHF, which is the one with Weird Al. So come out. It'll be really fun. And then Saturday, March 30th at 5 p.m., we will have game night. And then also there's a lot of snacks out on the table. So please eat. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any Zoom announcements? Okay. And now Ted will lead us in our closing song. Hymn number 121? 318. Okay, never mind.
And maybe since we're over, we'll just do one verse. Let's just do one verse through. This is a familiar one. We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are. In us is true. We would be one in living for tomorrow. Oh, sorry, wrong one. To show to all a new community. This happens twice in the hymnal. I must have been singing the other one, but good job, you guys.